I hope Martina is with us still. I don't know.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, very good. Okay, welcome back. Okay, we'll start the session 4, panel discussion. The title of the session is Migration and the Labor Market. What can Europe and Japan learn from each other's experience? My name is TAMURA. I'm going to serve as the session chair for this session. Actually, I have been listening carefully to the interpretation today, and I'm quite tempted to speak in Japanese totally because of the excellence quality of the interpretation today. So therefore, I'm going to use Japanese in general, but time to time, particularly when I communicate with participants from Europe, I'm trying to use English. So please use headphone actively so that everybody can follow the entire discussion of the session. Okay, I'm going to switch to Japanese now.
So this session 4, as you could see, this is called a panel discussion, and different from the previous 3 sessions. Session 4 will proceed as follows. I will take 5 minutes to explain the objective of this session, followed by 4 panelists speaking for about 5 minutes each. Then remaining time will be spent on round table discussion. So I will ask questions to start with as the chair, followed by 4 panelists asking questions against each other, and then finally 4 panelists are to answer to the questions raised. And then any remaining time, we will use that time to entertain some questions from the floor. So 4 panelists I would like to introduce are Professor Ryo Kambayashi, who is the professor at Musashi University, and then Professor OKUBO, the professor at Keio University,
RAPOPORT, co-director of the CPR Research and the Policy Network on Migration, / professor at the Paris School of Economics. And the 4th panelist is Martina VIARENGO, the professor, the Department of Economics at Geneva Graduate Institute and CPR fellow.
So I will explain the purpose of this session as the chair of the session. The purpose of this session is to take the expert discussions from the previous 3 sessions and connect them to various debates surrounding the acceptance of foreign workers in Japan, so that this discussion can help us Japanese make policy judgment on the issue. Most of us here are Japanese, and we can learn a lot from European experiences because they have a lot more accumulation of their work and experiences. So we would like to refer to the expert discussion on the previous 3 sessions, and then hopefully they will help us make optimal policy decisions. Foreign workers issues are very challenging and complex. So with limited amount of time today, we can only address limited aspects of this issue. So Professor Hashimoto explained already in the session 3. However, I have drawn this from the government agencies' documents. Sorry about my handwritten writings. I would like to explain about the current situation in Japan, and if Japanese panelists would like to jump in and supplement information, you are welcome. So first page was published by the Immigration Service Agency. This shows the trend of the foreign workers in Japan and the foreign residents in Japan and foreign workers. After pandemic, it increased quite rapidly. Currently, it stands at 4.13 million for the foreign residents and the foreign workers 2.57 million, as mentioned by Dr. Hashimoto. With regard to the number of foreign residents in Japan against the Japanese population, it stands at 3.35% as of last year. Since 1980s, and towards the end of the 1980s, we are showing the trend over 4 decades. So the establishment of the visa status of foreigners and the foreign workers acceptance systems have been developed. In year 1990, there was a revised immigration law, and also there was some institutional changes that facilitate the introduction of the foreign workers. And there was important research regarding this matter that are involving Professor Kambayashi. In 1993, the TIT system was established. So the creation of the technical intern training program in 1993 and the establishment of the specified skilled worker system in 2019 in response to criticism that the technical intern training program, originally intended for international cooperation, had become a de facto labor supply scheme, is the representative one. And now in 2019, the Immigration Service Agency was also established along with the revision of the Immigration Act. And the Technical Intern Training Act was passed to replace the Technical Intern Training Program with the new Training and Employment Program. At the same time, Japan has created various residence status to actively accept highly skilled workers. In 2014, the status is highly skilled professional business manager and engineer specialist in humanity and international services were newly created or integrated from existing categories. Page number 2 shows that the different categories of residential status. There are 4 major types. 1, statuses that allow employment. 2, statuses based on personal status or position. 3, statuses for designated specific activities. 4, statuses that do not allow employment. Even for category 4, employment is allowed within limits of permission for activities outside the status is granted. The most of the statuses mentioned on page 1, like a business manager and high-skilled workers, they fall under category 1, that is statuses that allow employment. Page 3 shows the number of people in each status as of last year. Within category 1, technical intern training is shown separately. And this staying based on the personal status or the social position number 650,000, and then those staying for employment purposes number 870,000, and specified activities number 110,000, which include working holiday participants, foreign nurse, and certified care workers, candidates under the EPA. And TIT accounts for 500,000, 90%, and also those with permission for activities outside their status count 450,000, 18%. And the total 2.57 million, as mentioned on page 1, also not shown in the graph. The fastest growth in recent years has been among those staying for employment purposes. with growth rate consistently in the 20% range over the past 4 years. In contrast, statuses based on personal status have grown only 2 to 3%. So the pie chart on page 4 shows the nationalities of these 2.57 million people: Vietnam, China, and the Philippines, Nepal, Indonesia, Myanmar, and Brazil follow. Specifically, Myanmar, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Nepal, those nationalities have shown significant growth. The page 5 shows industry and firm size distribution. By industry, manufacturing is 25%, services 15%, and wholesale 13%. Also not shown in the graph, the medical and welfare sector has seen remarkable growth, with annual increase in the 20 to 30% range since 2016. By firm size or business size, the largest share, which is 36%, is in establishments with fewer than 30 employees. Although I will not go into detail, the imbalance between urban and non-urban areas is also an important issue. Finally, this page shows the government policy stance on accepting foreign workers published by Immigrant Service Agency. Japan actively accepts foreign workers in specialized and technical fields, while workers in other fields require careful consideration. For the latter, Japan requires examination of needs, economic effects, social costs, such as education and social security, necessary infrastructure, public safety, and the need for national consensus. This concludes my overview of the current situation regarding the acceptance of foreign workers in Japan. If Japanese panelists have additions or corrections, please do not hesitate. I explained mainly the numbers of foreign workers, but labor supply and labor demand balance in Japan and the position of foreign workers with it, maybe those are the matters that should be covered by Professor Kambayashi. And the position of foreign workers within, in relation to the need for broad examination of foreign workers issues, Professor Okubo's recent public opinion survey results will provide valuable input. So that is all from my side. Now I would like to invite 4 panelists to speak. I think I asked panelists to kind of highlight the discussion of the session they served as a main speaker. The session 3, the main speaker was Dr. Hashimoto, and also Professor Kambayashi is and Dr. Hashimoto have done the joint research, and Dr. Hashimoto talked about the joint research. So hopefully, Professor Kambayashi can talk about the joint research as his own presentation. With regard to the Professor Okubo, you are not a main speaker, but you have done the survey on the foreign workers, so you are to share that recent research. So starting with Dr. Kambayashi and then RAPOPORT, Professor RAPOPORT, and then Professor VIARENGO. So Professor Kambayashi, please. Thank you very much. My name is Kambayashi. So I would like to talk about the Japanese cases with regard to this topic of a panelist. So this is the starting point. Population is declining in Japan, and then also after 2010, employment rate has been increasing quite rapidly. Prime age, 15 to 64 years old, the employment rates is reaching 80%. So in 2024, this is actually the maximum of OECD countries. In 2005, this level was the average of G7, but it can be said that in Japanese labor market, almost all the people who are in the working wages are working. So this is the rough calculation of how the labor demands are met. So before COVID-19, the labor has been declining while the employment was increasing. So the gap was widening. However, the gap was only filled by 30% by the foreign workers. But after COVID-19, the 60% of the gap, or 100%, are filled by the foreign workers. So foreign workers are no longer supplemental workers. They are actually supporting the employment changes in Japan. So based on that, I would like to talk today about the current foreign workers-related policy. So the working age employment rates have been increasing mainly by the female part-timers. So how can we convert the female part-timers into full-time? They have to achieve the work-life balance, and they have to design their career, and they need to receive the training. In Japan, this employment gap between men and women has been reducing. And this involved the focus on the change of the mindset of eliminating unconscious bias against the gender. However, it is necessary to change the management, but that is not fully understood. So management style hasn't been changed. That prevents IT implementation and technological innovation to be implemented, and women continue to work as a part-timers. So there's a more dependency on foreign workers. With regard to the foreign workers, as Dr. Hashimoto spoke, we have a different visa types. And within the labor market, employers need to take some responsibilities to reduce the wage gap. So that's the current situation. However, this approach is effective only within the range where employees' incentives are maintained. For example, Japanese language, the business is only incentivized to train their foreign workers so that they can manage their work on a day-to-day basis. However, this Japanese language training do not focus on the day-to-day conversational linguistic skills to facilitate their day-to-day work, their lifestyle within Japan. So they are only focusing on the workplace linguistic skills necessity. So under the current employment policy, there's a lot of focus on the bilateral relationship between employers and the foreign workers. So the foreign workers are to be included as core workers within the Japanese labor market. So that is the direction that government is trying to aim for. However, coexistent policies or the multicultural policies are only implemented when the relevant municipalities encounter some problems in their healthcare system, educational system. Therefore, the employment, the strategy, and the multicultural coexistent policies are not interlinked, but we have to really change their relationship. But the outlook is not quite bleak, because in Japan, the foreign residence policies are often taken care of under the name of the social policies. So now we have to think about how employers should take responsibilities. So we heard about the refugees. So refugees come from outside. So they are supplied from outside the country. In order to deal with the inflow of refugees, we have only been implementing social policy. However, that mechanism may not be viable anymore. So possibly we would like to hear about this point from our Western European participants today. Maybe some researchers are insisting upon managing foreign residents under the social policies. But in order to do so, Japanese market need to implement the drastic change in the management style and promote technical innovation and change the labor market into a more westernized labor market. However, that goes against the current labor foreign workers policy. So there are dual structures here. And so we have to think about how we can manage the employment policy and social policy, and how we manage that the balance. That is the current problem we have to address. Thank you. Now, Professor OKUBO, please.
Thank you very much for having me. And this is Toshihiro OKUBO from RIETI and Keio University. So I specialize in labor, or not the labor, or the foreign workers. This is about international trade, or else economy graph is what I work for regional economics. Or the spatial economics is my specialty. So within the international trade, for the factors within the international front, there has been discussions for labor from the past, or else maybe the transmission of the capital. So within the panel, if we do have some time, we would like to introduce several of such issues too in relations with the laborers' transfers and mobility, because it is taken up largely. So maybe I might be talking a little bit different from other researchers. And within the paper from Professor RAPOPORT, these days, especially within the international trade, there could be the topic of perceptions widely focused going forward. So the economists will be saying that, see the data or the economics. And using a theory, they will be saying that I do not like what I do not like, but I do understand what they are saying. However, we have to be mindful about the perceptions of the general public. So I would like to focus on the perception or the cognitive area, which is parallelly linked with the session number 1 in Japanese case. And for the data, I have been working with NIWA Research Institute, and we have been going through the research of a panel investigation 14 times, and there were 8,100 number of end. This was been conducted in this year, February to March. We will be using some of these cases. And I would like to have some questions for the foreign workers too. So just to brief, first of all, this is about exposure. What I mean by exposure is, if you are working at a work space. This is to ask whether you have foreign workers at your workplace. And the second is daily life. So do you have difficulty to live along with foreigners? That was another question. And the other question is about coming back to workplace question again. So are foreign workers essential at workplace? And regarding policy questions, we asked the people responding, are you supporting immigration policy or not? And then for the short-term policy, do you think that foreign workers must be restricted visa-wise or not? And this is plottings that we have been summarizing. First of all, regarding the plot, the horizontal line is the exposure, because this is going to be the real core of my discussion. So meaning that how much opportunity does workers usually work with a foreign worker? And onto your left-hand side, whether or not the Japanese workers can live along with the foreign workers or not is plotted. So this is by the occupation, 38 occupation plotted within a chart, and meaning that there's 38 points. For each of the occupation, it is respectively shown. However, it does not show any correlations. Red, blue, green is the plotted dot, and red stands out for the professional office worker. For instance, the people working in the law, or else doctors, medical doctors are it, or else technical workers included. A blue dot is walking worker, meaning that this is a worker at the site, or the service people working face-to-face. And the green is the office workers, meaning administrative clerk, for instance, accounting. And the next page is how much these foreign workers are needed at the work site is asked. That is indicated within the vertical line, and we have a diagonal line which shows a positive correlations, and the causality or inference. We do not understand that. We just look at the assumptions. So many of the people are having an understanding that foreign workers are needed at their workplace. And here, on the vertical line and the horizontal line, we do have positive correlations. However, there is differences by the workplace outliers, for instance, agricultures or food and beverages industry. They are very far away from the trend at the very bottom side. So for the immigration policy, meaning that people are much less supportive, especially the agriculture or the distribution policy is much disregarded by many people. And looking at more in the short run, looking at the visa control, whether or not visa control should be more strict or not was a question asked. And this is a very loose positive correlation, but then the area where to focus is the agricultural area and then the food industry. They are the outliers lying on the bottom, and the top part is including the lawyers. So even within the short run, they need to be controlled by visa. And many people have been answering like that. Or on the other hand, for the agricultural industry, they might not be needing, they do not have the opinion that they do not need a strong control of visa. In the short run, the foreign laborers could be, so we asked whether they could contribute to the Japanese market or not. That's the vertical line. And the horizontal is the exposure. Do you see any foreign workers at your workplace? And then you do see a very loose positive correlation. However, there's many outliers by the work and the industry. And as an alternative, we can just mention about the digital economy, whether or not the void workers could be filled by digital workers, and maybe this could be working well for Japanese market. However, when asked about this question, there is almost no correlation, and the red dot, the professional dot, people are answering that they support the digital support for all these areas. So this is unrelated with the foreign workers. In summary, whether or not the foreign workers are working at your workplace or not, meaning exposure-related question, was conducted. And we had the answer that they are working. However, according to workplaces, it is uneven. For instance, for people working at the site, the long-term immigration, people are mostly negative about the foreign workers in manufacturing productivity or agriculture, or else for the business management and legal finance, people are mostly positive. So with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you so much.
大久保先生、ありがとうございました。Okay, Professor RAPOPORT, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity to present some views. So the title of the panel is, what can Europe and Japan learn from each other? So I will argue that there is much to learn. I don't want to be, to transpose too much from one context to another. I think it's difficult to do so. I must also say I know so little about Japan that I would feel, very uncomfortable in teaching lessons to a context I don't know. The good thing about not knowing about the context is you can pick whatever is relevant in what I'm going to say, and that will be on you. Okay? So I think there is a lot to learn, though, from these two different contexts. One, they are obviously very different. Arguably, Europe has, on average, 15% of immigrants. Switzerland has 35%. Luxembourg has more than 50%. So these are the highest rates. But even big countries like France or Germany have around 12 to 15% of immigrants. So it's a very different context. Also because Europe has a huge history of emigration, and they became immigration country in the second half of the 20th century, while Japan had some experience of immigration, but was limited both in terms of scope and time. Now, I think there is a lot to learn from 50 years of economics research on immigration, and I will have 4, points that I think are important takeaways. First, there's a lot of research on the impact of immigration on labor markets, okay, on the impact of immigration on wages and employment prospects of native workers. And here my summary of the results would be much ado about nothing. It means that these effects are not massive. The controversy is it 1% more wages or 1% less wages? On average, these effects are negligible. It doesn't mean that for specific categories they can be there could be some redistributive effects. Some of the reasons why there is so little labor market impact is also because of those complementarities between foreign and native workers, both within skill categories and across skill categories. So across skill categories, usually immigrants have a different educational and skill structure, so they tend to complement natives. And within skill categories, there is this notion of diversity. Okay, the fact that you have a diverse workforce, for example, diverse team of engineers, for example, they know more, when they come from different backgrounds. They have skill complementarity, complementary knowledges, and so this has productive and growth impacts. And there are more growth impacts than this. There are a lot of growth impacts on innovation, on productivity growth in general. Immigrants allow for better integration into the global economy. So all these things are some, important insights from recent research. So how can we leverage this for the policy discussion, I would say, my main message would be, an important challenge for Japan, in my view, again, with the very little I know, is how to attract a more diverse, skilled workforce, because this is something essential to long-term growth, to innovation, to productivity growth, and so on. And I think it's difficult to do that without promoting a more diverse and a more open society. And that's a challenge given how close Japan currently is, and we were reminded the numbers. We've seen a lot of growth, I wouldn't say of immigration, of foreign workers. Remember, this is temporary migration. There is a turnover. These are not people who are intended from the onset to be integrated into society. They are intended to be replaced, to be a turnover. They come as guest worker for some time. Their permit could be renewed, but at some point they are not expected to stay and build their lives here and so on. So I think there is this necessary ingredient for attracting a diverse and skilled workforce, which is to offer long-term prospects of integration. And it's difficult to do this on a purely selective basis, to say we want Korean engineers, but not Vietnamese caregivers as long-term, because one of the things I want to argue is that people who have skills have a lot of opportunities. They have a lot of choice where to go, and for them they will choose where to settle, also based on how open, diverse the society is. And if a society has some very restrictive discourse on immigration, a generally negative attitude toward openness and diversity, except for the very highly skilled that we would want to cherry pick, it doesn't work this way. So I think there is this tension, and everything I saw in the policy discussions, I was at an academic conference yesterday and the day before, and today in the presentation, all I've seen about the policy is about temporary migration, about close-skilled workers, and I think this it's certainly important, but I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, and the main thing is, I think somewhere else. So two maybe thoughts to open the discussion. There is this famous sentence by Max Frisch, who is a Swiss, so it's not just tribute to Beatrice, but it's a well-known Swiss humanist writer, I would say, who said, we wanted workers and we got people. So this is an important thing to understand. When you do immigration, you get workers, but also people, and this is something to factor in when you design immigration policy. And then the second point is that accommodating a larger and more diverse population, should you want to, and I think in terms of long-term growth you should, this requires some type of cultural change. So my point on the fact that you cannot have a negative anti-immigration discourse, let's call it a xenophobic discourse to make it short, and attract a highly skilled workforce, immigrant workforce, was summarized in a recent paper I published with my longtime co-author, Keio, in Economic Policy last year, which we call the vicious circle of xenophobia. It's a model with multiple equilibria where essentially, to make it short, you have a relationship between the level of populism and the skill ratio of immigrants. This is the curve you see. So the more populism you have, it's on the vertical axis, the lower the quality of immigration as measured by the ratio of skill to unskilled. So here it's on low skill to high skill. So higher level means lower skill ratio. And you have the reverse relationship. When you have immigration, it creates more support for populist parties, but what matters is not the size of immigration, but the skill content. Okay, so it's really the ratio of unskilled to skilled which determine this. So you have this this framework with multiple equilibria, and you have essentially two equilibria. One which is called G, which is the good one, where you have low levels of populism, and it's a judgment of value, but we also know economically that populist governments and policies have a growth cost. They are not efficient. And so it's a good equilibrium in this sense, because you have low levels of populism and high quality immigration. And then you have the bad equilibrium where you have lots of populism, but the only immigrants that would come in such a context are people who are low skilled, because the high skilled prefer to go to a more attractive environment in terms of general openness to diversity and immigration. So that's to support what I said before. And then regarding cultural change, you may say, you know, it's very difficult to change, but it's not always the case. Take this example. I think what you see on this graph is attitudes toward interracial marriages in the US. Interracial in the context of US means marriages between black and white people. And so you see that in 1858, about 4% of the US population was supportive of interracial marriages. That would include blacks. They were also against. And then by 2007, so the year just before the election of a black president, that was 80%. So it's a very important cultural change, right? And it happened within, say, 1 or 2 generations. So to conclude, I don't think people change or countries change because they want to be good, or to be because of goodwill and good feelings and so on. They change if they feel they need to change because of the risk of declining if you don't change. And so the question is how to do this. I think understanding the relationship between attitudes to the determinants of attitudes towards immigration is very important. That's what Professor OKUBO described. We have some projects in this direction. I think this is something very important. And the other, let me end with this. This is a short chapter by David Landis, who is a great economic historian, professor at Harvard University, who essentially had a take why Spain failed. Why Spain was not the country that dominated, that was the first to become hegemonous among Europeans. Why was it Britain and not Spain, while Spain was much richer, had access to colonies before, and so on? And his take on this is because Spain was very closed society. They expelled the Jews, they expelled the Muslims, and they developed an ideology of purity, of blood purity, and to the point that people wanted to not be able to be suspected of having Jewish or Muslim blood, and so they refrained from doing activities that was associated with Jews or Muslims, such as trade, such as science and medicine, and so they missed the industrial revolution and the scientific revolution. So again, I don't know whether it may speak or not to you, but I think, again, the point is it's not just about being good or bad. It's also, I think, cultural change comes from the realization that there is economic competition, and being open is an asset. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Merci. Merci pour vos paroles. Thank you very much. Okay, next, Martina, Professor VIARENGO, are you with us still? Okay, floor is yours. 5 minutes, please.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So thank you again for having the opportunity to present in this panel. I was asked to summarize findings and discussion from the earlier session. This session has examined the gender dimension of refugees' labor market integration with a focus on the Swiss context. The study I presented draws on the entire population of refugees in Switzerland over a 20-year period from 1998 to 2018, combining individual level administrative records with social security data and employment data. The quasi-random spatial dispersal policy allows for causal identification of the effects of the initial local conditions in the host country. The outcome of interest is labor market integration, which is measured through employment rates and earnings. We find two sets of results. On source country culture, we find that women from countries with higher female to male labor force participation ratios appear to integrate faster, and this effect strengthens over time. Higher fertility in the country of origin is associated with lower integration for women, though this effect weakens after the first decade and then becomes negligible. Importantly, men's labor market outcomes in Switzerland appear largely unaffected by these cultural indicators from their country of origin, and so the effects that we find are specific to women. On initial local conditions, higher local unemployment at arrival disproportionately affects women's employment. A larger connational network appears to benefit women differently from men. And more progressive gender attitudes in the assigned canton are associated with a lower gender employment gap. The evidence points not to the limits of integration, but to the conditions under which it succeeds. And this is where the Swiss experience offers useful lessons for countries at different stages of developing their integration frameworks. Turning to the discussion, Dr. Liu comparison with Japan is particularly instructive. Gender gaps in refugee integration appear to emerge across very different host country contexts, which reinforces the importance of systematically measuring the gender dimension of migration and integration. On policy, in light of the evidence on the persistence of gender gaps over the long run, even after 20 years, the findings suggest it may be useful to consider the complementarity between gender-neutral and gender-targeted approaches to support more effective and more inclusive integration outcomes. Finally, two directions seem particularly promising for future research. First, the channels through which origin country culture operates deserve closer examination. Future work could try to distinguish between fertility behavior, household bargaining, and other mechanisms of cultural transmission. Second, whether origin country norms persist into the second generation of refugees or migrants, and at what speed they change, remains an open and important question. And I'll stop here.
Okay. Martina, thank you very much. Okay. We have, at this moment, 10 minutes left, and I'm not going to use my prerogative as a moderator to make a first question. Instead, I would like to give opportunity to the other panelists to pose a question or comment each other. Already in your presentation, Professor Kambayashi, you already posed a question about your European experience about the social policy approach. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit if you would like to do that, or you can expect them to respond directly to you. Or you also can add some other question. No. OKUBO Sensei, do you have any question to the other panelists, particularly from Europe?
No.
No more. Okay. The Professor Rapoport, you made a very interesting intervention. You would like to pose some question to other panelists?
Yeah, maybe to the first speaker, not so much about what he presented, but since he's the co-author of the right? You were the author of the paper on the visas. So there was two things I was curious about. You say that immigration had an impact on the distribution of wages, but is it purely compositional, or is it because immigrants change the wages of native workers? I think it's a very different conclusion, if it's compositional or if it's an endogenous change of native wages. And then the second is that no wage gap doesn't mean no discrimination, right? Because if you cannot move, if the labor market is very segmented, this is a form of discrimination. So that was just two points I was interested in from this presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Martina, do you have any question or comment or respond to the question from the Professor Kambayashi about the kind of consistency or conflict between the two approaches, social policy and labor market policy?
Yes, so I have a question for Professor Kambayashi. Given the rapid growth in foreign workers in Japan, particularly in manufacturing services, could you tell us more about how career trajectories and earning dynamics vary by migration status and education attainment? Understanding these dynamics seem particularly important for thinking about the integration policies. And a question for Professor OKUBO. Does the NERA's labor force survey also cover students? If so, could you tell us more about the share of foreign-born students come to Japan to study and then remain after completing their education? And what is the typical pattern that you observe? This connects to the broader question of how initial local conditions at arrival could shape longer-term integration trajectories.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe response should come from the Professor Kambayashi first.
Thank you so much. So this is going to be very technical. Therefore, I would like to be very brief. So the result of our intervention is that we can explain about the wage differences, but whether or not there's a discrimination behind this, we were not able to judge because there's a premium upon the wages paid to the foreign workers. So meaning that initially we must hand over the wages much higher compared to the Japanese workers. But if it is the same level, there could be some discriminations. But then if the difference is zero, then there is no discrimination. That will be a negative. That's the bottom line of our discussion. And this is also related to the decomposition of Dr. Kondo. So we have a fixed effect. This is called fixer effect. And for our case, we cannot basically work on the decomposition. So this is technical. And as Professor Rapoport mentioned about the dynamics, this is a problem. As Dr. Hashimoto has presented, the TIT and the SSWs in their work in the world, there are something starting to become evident of the best practices. So within one company, how will the foreign workers become a core worker within one company? They will be the forebearers of the core work within a company. And this is going to be the point, how the companies will be able to leverage on these foreign workers. And then if that is going to be viable, then the dynamics will be viable. But if not, just like a rolling door, within 3 years' term, there's going to be a replacement. So it could be said as a dynamics, but then it is rather a very simple structure. And within the Japanese way of employment practice, let's say when the company is hiring the foreign workers for more than 10 years, whether or not these people will be appointed as a managerial workers or else or have a franchise on his own, that is going to be what is questioned now. So the responsibility of the user side of the company is just the same, identical with the practice that's been done within the traditional Japan. So the direction of the overall policy of the labor market is how to nurture the foreign workers between or inside the Japanese labor force. However, we don't have the systematic way of the scheme yet. Therefore, we not know about the dynamics yet.
My short answer is following. So my data is only for Japanese worker. So no student workers, no students, but the student workers are included, and no foreigners. So this is my answer.
ありがとうございます。すいません。時間があと数分なので、いただいたフロアからいただいた質問のうち、最初の2つ。
So we have received questions from the floor. So there are two I would like to cover. The first question is written at the very bottom. The Japanese policy to accept foreign workers have become more stringent. The visa criteria have become quite strict, and there's a lot of focus on discipline. So who will benefit from the more stringent immigration policy for foreign workers? And has this approach taken place historically in Europe? That's the first question. The second question is for Professor Kambayashi. Well, the foreign workers are filling the gap between the labor demand and also shortfall. However, the Japanese population include the foreign residents in Japan. So is there any double counting of the foreign workers filling the labor gap? So Dr. Kambayashi, first question. With regard to the visa issue, so employers and foreign workers, that bilateral relationship is given focus. So how to control that more, control it to make it more stringent? Depends on who wants to make them. Depends who wants to make it stringent. So currently, those criteria or the conditions, requirements are made more stringent by the third party, not by the employers or workers. So the third party is actually interfering with the changes in the requirements for visa conditions. The more stringent visa requirements are driven now by the third party, not by the workers, not by the employers. So the benefits are not going to the workers on the ground. So it should go to the workers or employers. However, as I said, the social policy and employment policy are completely separate in Japan. Therefore, there is no logic as to we will implement this employment policy because under the social policy, these benefits would go to these parties. So this does not stand that. So the question to the European participants is that do you have any experience in Europe to make the requirements of a visa status more stringent?
Did I make sense to you? I mean, there is a question
Can I
addressed to. Okay, the Martina, can you answer this question that whether the European society has some experience in the strengthening the kind of restriction of the kind of acceptance policy of the immigrant in the history?
So I would say that based on evidence. Evidence from existing research suggests that legal status and access to labor markets are particularly important for successful integration of refugees, and therefore policies that ensure early work rights and legal recognition not only facilitate immediate economic participation, but also set the stage for long-term social cohesion. In terms of evidence concerning effectiveness of other policies, language training also is another effective intervention in both improving employment opportunities and also fostering social cohesion and integration. On the other hand, there is more mixed evidence concerning active labor market policies. They seem to be dependent on the specific context, and certain programs like job search assistance, vocational training seems to be promising. However, evidence so far suggests that the overall cost effectiveness of these policies may vary and may be dependent also on other institutional factors and the specific structure of the labor market. Okay. So overall, I would say that interventions, we should think about interventions not in isolation, but we really have to think about a sort of ecosystem and also consider the overall cost effectiveness and potential for scaling them up.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, last question to be addressed to the Professor Kambayashi.
So, Professor Kambayashi, I would like you to go on with the gap issue. So, in one word, this is about the workers, and workers are included within the population. Therefore, population minus the foreign workers, and so it is not double counted. Thank you very much. I understand. So, if we had more time, I think we could have answered many more of your questions. However, because of time constraint, we are going to be closing session 4. And thank you very much for our speakers today. Please provide a round of applause.